Hey, it is your buddy, Peace and Harmony with you here today. Much love going out to all the beautiful, empowered harmonizers. We are zooming in and focusing in on a little bit more in depth on a great viewer question that talks about this individual in their life who is narcissistic, who was a little bit too rigid. In other words, it was very structured, very demanding, very regimented, and not very yielding or flexible. And so, really, when you're finding yourself in this very rigid relationship role, you're going to find more often than not, if you don't have the flexibility to be able to go and have the trust to go with the wind and to not sort of cast your dreams aside when they come up, or sweep inspiration aside when it comes up. In other words, to learn that trust of flexibility once you have boundaries and you can get some spaciousness and you're not like overly attached to having to procure or protect the relationship. So there's a growing process, I would say, that takes place in healthy relationships. But, there is a very rigid aspect to a narcissist, meaning there is no other way. It is their way. There is no highway. There is no jetway. There is no paddle stream. There is no other voyage that you can take to meet them on another dimension, another platitude, with other terra firma. It is not going to happen. There's a rigidity. And really, the rigidity for them has served them well. Being very controlling or very what you might consider compartmentalized. Something that is very much how they want to see it, but discounts reality, i.e. feedback. The narcissist usually wants to push that away. They want to sort of be in the ivory tower, but not hear the call of the people. In other words, they want to be the commander, but they don't want to have the play, because they have this need to sort of have an insatiable need for power and control. So unfortunately, it ends up having a reverse effect when there's rigidity. If you're too rigid, you end up like losing, I would say, a sort of carefreeness of life. You're too protective. You're too paranoid. The narcissists, they're too paranoid about procuring their goal, their prize, whatever it is that they want, whether it's a position, a title, a advancement of their career, to be viewed as a specific way. I kind of call it the big hat, no cattle. Basically, they want you to treat them as if, but yet their behavior has not proven them as such. So it's kind of like the iron has not met the fire and it has not been tested. So when we really talk about healing, it's to understand really what does a test of self-trust look like for you, where you don't commit another blooper. You don't fall on your behind. You don't fall on your face. You don't fall. You are elevated. You are present. And you don't you might feel the ship rocking, but you've got this sense of boundary and a standard which is based on self-respect and competency. So that sort of flexibility will then come from that mindset. If one is super rigid, which might have served you well for some time, there is no doubt about having some very, very firm guidelines, especially for a lot of people. They are spectacular with spreadsheets, with analysis, with order, with practicality, with perfection, with just really, very fine hand, very fine tune, really orderly people. And then there are, other people, who are not like that. And then, everybody else is sort of an annoyance. So it's kind of like the prodigy, I had a good friend in my high school who, they said, or who I feel was a child prodigy. Just the way he could take up the piano, the grand piano, at like age 14, it was just like mesmerizing. He would just, be able to play really without having taken any formal lessons. He had just really heard his sister practicing it over and over and over and over again. And, he was masterfully, able to command that instrument, which was like really cool. I mean, so I was, of course, very drawn to that creativity and that uniqueness, that flair. But then there's a flexibility, I think, that must come with that ability and then that buoyancy. But if you're very rigid on the protective of something, so again, that rigidity, it is there as a protective mechanism. And it's just like, it's a requirement. There is something that is very hurtful or could be difficult for them to process by being something different. So for them to be flexible or to be open-minded or to hear something out, they don't have that, that leeway. There's other pressures in other way, but oftentimes that can become very, very pronounced and cause people a lot of personal trouble in the long run. I mean, these are people, who are still getting upset when they're in their 70s and 80s, when they can't get something right. And, even though if they just were to take a deep breath and have some composure, they would realize that kicking the door doesn't open it, but like jiggling the key opens it. So, you see these just behaviors that they get entrenched in that are just sort of rage, just sort of envelops them. It's just sort of like I don't know, they get into some sort of pillowcase or something that they just sort of get all into it, and then that's all that they see, and then they feel trapped, uncomfortable if they have to be anything different. And that is fine and good for people to be that way. But when there is a narcissist who has a pathological sense of self-importance and coupled with a lack of empathy, this can create a lot of really scarring hurt and woundedness in others, especially when it requires the absolute opposite of others. It requires the absolute of flexibility. It requires the absolute of patience. It requires the absolute of listening. It requires the absolute of support, which is unconditional. So it requires for it to move, and if it's going to be in a rock, it has to be the opposite. In other words, it has to be like water to the rock. I mean, it has to be, and so, oftentimes people don't realize the narcissist does not appreciate the demandingness with which they require of others. And that, that demanding might be well earned. It might be required. It might be, something, but for not everybody. The narcissist sort of has this entitlement, and oftentimes, the problem is it puts a lot of strain and stress on others, and they will always feel defeated or deflated. So this rigidity, which then causes you to be overly flexible and really, realize that rigidity then is something that you can learn, that you have now as a strength of quality within you to have that flexibility and to be able to respond rather than react, and being conscious and aware versus being unconscious and unaware and just sort of being like the 80-year-old guy who's still yelling at the postman, where's my mail? In other words, they always know it's going to take this and this long, but they still get upset and they get riled up and they're missing like life's finer moments. So you have to realize then it's kind of coming through that rigidity, and you finding that is not a good fit. That is not what is penultimate for you. Realize that the problem it creates in the relationship is the narcissist oftentimes does not appreciate what others, what they might go through or have to put up with, or they might have to give in order to allow this relationship to become where it is. In other words, really the sacrifice. I would say, namely, with a rigid narcissist, others in the relationship are the one to do a lot of sacrificing, but very quickly the scales can get imbalanced right away. The narcissist is like putting their finger on the scales. Me credit here, me credit always, and then they can jump up and down and try to balance it out, but it's just like, you're just a little feather pipsqueak, which there can be certain things, but that is why you've got, couples. That's why you have give and take. That's why you have more than one, but there becomes problematic when the narcissist just sort of has somebody there in order to just serve as a buffer or a sort of indentured sort of servant, or something else, which requires a huge demand. And so, there's a stress for the output. It requires a lot of effort for this. So realize it's okay for you to feel flexible in relationships, especially when it comes to healing and moving forward. And realize where your flexibility is, and realize that if you've been overly flexible to giving, realize that the covert narcissist particularly will draw to them very leader, high energy oriented people. People who can get it done. People who can get it done in a snap. People who, can take the helm and, gives them a lot of relief, for them to be. So there's going to be this give and take, like a slider scale in your relationship, and you're going to have to find where your balance is. So like pleasure and productivity, and then so look at the rigidity. In other words, where was there no give? And where should there, or is it okay for there to be some give, reconciliation, and just sort of, I see that. And yes, this, yes, that about you. So, with the narcissist, you do always have to sort of stroke their ego, which oftentimes is very legit, but it needs to be sort of scaled down. The narcissist ego, if, if they could just have everybody, jumping up, out of a paper bag for them, all the time. Oh, wow. And they would just love it. I mean, they love that admiration. They love the attention. They love to be the center of attention. There's nothing wrong with that. There's only something wrong when it becomes too rigid and then others can't receive the attention or the limelight or the sunshine or the sunlight or whatever light, even though it might be different. The limelight that you might be living, or or vice versa, that they might be living, is different, but you have your own. And so if that is not tuned in, recognized, and respected, how can you expect yourself to have the self-respect that presupposes flexibility? So if you are really self-respecting, and meaning you respect and honor yourself, and you do consider things, you have the ability to be sort of flexible and what people might call resilient. And, that's always one big misnomer, I would say, in the mental health, field. Just be resilient. This and this, you're grief-stricken. This has happened to your father. Just be resilient. It's not that easy. And I know this with myself. So when there is a degree of required self-respect, that is there and requires new pathways and new flexibility where there was none previously, and then firmer boundaries where there was none previously. Meaning that oftentimes one or more parties might have been too rigid or inflexible and unyielding, where others might have been too yielding, too sacrificing, lay out, walk over, and so there has to be a give and take in a happy balance, especially when it's acknowledged and validated. So in other words, aired out. If you're just gonna walk around with it like, snarled up in your big toe, like you're just, ready to, hammer foot onto somebody, then it's a little bit too bottled up. There's something there where you are not giving self-respect to self. And then where had that been mirrored back in a funny way, where you didn't know what self-respect is, or was that not validated or rewarded? Like, if you weren't rewarded or valued for that, then oftentimes you're going to find your life is going to be off on the skids, off on the rough spots more so than the smooth. So that, and so that coming into a little bit more, coming to that as a number one, as a priority. I would say number one with healing is understanding and enforcing what are your priorities. Especially like in the book that I'm working on, a big section that I feel is a deterrent towards personal growth and moving forward is not only lessons learned, but also the section of what do I procrastinate on. It's oftentimes those items that you procrastinate on that cause the most tension, and they've just loomed larger and larger and larger, even though they could have been dealt with and they would have never taken up that much cargo in your abdominal space. They would have not taken up all of this. So you don't realize it takes a lot of energy, I feel, to repress and suppress. But a lot of people get a lot of payoff from suppressing and being angry. They get a lot of payoff from being rageful. They get a lot of payoff from being, prideful. They get a lot of, there's a lot of payoff for them to be prickly. What was the, story about the BMW? I don't know, something about the prickles are on the inside. I don't know, but anyway, what they're trying to basically say is, they can be very adversely sort of pointed, sardonic, sort of hurtful towards others. And so there's a rigidity and inflexibility, I think, that comes with, is a big red flag with a narcissist, especially when they're trying to sort of hold things over in the corner, as if they can sort of control, and they like to control the dynamics, just kind of like you might consider a big news channel want to control all the flow of information, even though you don't even see what's going on. You just see a very tiny bit of the surface, but it's what they tell you you should know. So it's kind of like the narcissist loves to be in that aerospace, call room deck or whatever. They love, excuse me. Yep, guilty pleasure. I'm having some Mountain Dew. I have been juicing. By the way, this is the Diet Red, whatever it's called, Mountain Dew. I know it's so bad. It's a guilty pleasure, and I haven't had any in a long time with the pandemic. Oh, and by the way, remind me to circle back. Okay, anyway, about something that we're talking about is the narcissist oftentimes they want to control the information very much like the way a airport commander would call this, this come in, and then you, and then this, they want to always sort of call the shots. So in other words, they then, sort of give you a very rigid role that you can't really break out of. In other words, they don't really see you for who you are. They don't see you in your glory. They don't see you in your valley. They don't see you on the plateau. They don't see you in the light. They only see you sort of in the role that they want you to be. And so you can oftentimes feel that you can never grow beyond that, or be seen, heard, felt, acknowledged for that. And so it becomes a big no-no, a big cardinal sin, to be yourself, to be authentic, to be spontaneous, to be silly. They just are. So it's really a very lack of being able to know how to have empathy. So without that, that is going to change the current of the relationship. And so The rigidity is always, it's a protective mechanism to protect them from feeling that creates a feeling of unsafety. And that, if that is their self-soothing, then that is their strength. You have to permit and allow this. It's just, it has to be permitted. But when it gets to the degree, excuse me, when it gets to the degree that their opinions are so pointed, their judgment is so rigid, their finger is always pointing, you don't really have a chance just to be, and then, sort of be in touch and have that cohesiveness, coherency between the gut, the feeling, the vagus nerve, the gut feeling, what you're paying attention to, like your intuition, your instinct. I mean, these are important, like GPS. This is like your emotional GPS. Like, if you're cut off from that, you're going to feel lost. You're going to feel unrooted. You're going to feel that you're sort of disconnected from any ability to create productivity, profit, abundance, prolific, make contributions, things of this nature. You're going to feel cut off from that ability or that power, and allow it to sort of breathe, if you will. It's like it can be very, very bottled up. This sort of, which for them is like a deep hurt or shame or something. And even though, if it was only discussed or communicated in such a way, it wouldn't be all that. But the narcissist has a real personality that's designed around this. And once again, that is all well and good until it's, too much for others. And it sort of creates sort of a dissection or a boundary violation of others, which is an energetic, emotional, etheric energy, which means it is something that you feel. It's a, and so people, I say oftentimes, like we have a lot of viewers who have encountered this sort of in their upbringing. And so these people, they never really get to feel a sense of self-respect or a sense of playfulness. So they develop like an over responsibility or like a need to be the star to save a family system. So they might develop this sort of grandiosity, sort of this fantasy-like image. In other words, they're and they'll save the family. They'll redeem you from everybody else who's so terrible. I'm the one with the good grades or the talent, or I'm this, in other words, despite, we can just turn our cheek away to all that family hurt, and instead, let's just pay attention to this. So it's a very singular focus, which is not really what a family is. Isn't a family like, kind of join hands, and can't you expand the circle? I mean, I was just thinking about this, and the narcissist oftentimes is not comfortable with that, and that is all well and good. They can be very, very competitive. So, but the rigidity, once again, look at this, and oftentimes it's the seed of their neediness. It has nothing to do with you. But oftentimes it can make others very soft because they are unable to experience their own self-respect, which has boundaries which have to be witnessed, mirrored, and validated, and not held as a grudge. So they like to kind of hold, in the corner, and then just sort of, be able to, control like where you go, So it's a very sort of controlling thing, and it does not speak to people's abilities, which is the problem, or their truth. It does not give them the right to communicate. So once again, in other words, it's like a projecting of all of their hurt, all of their negativity, all their negative propaganda that they are just stirring up in their mind, microwaving, putting extra cheese drizzle, and they're just gonna sort of, throw it on you or do whatever. If it's gonna burn you, hurt you, see, you're the one who made the mess, as they throw it onto you. I mean, it's just, It's there. It's just, it always ends up in your lap. No matter what you do, no matter how, you get a better engine, a better car, a better smile, they're always going to keep this sort of janky, disconnect like feeling. And so, people can tend to go around in these cycles until they go, you know what, this is not the cycle for me. I am not a good fit with someone who is abusive. I am not a good fit for someone who is rigid and judgmental. I am, it causes too much sacrifice. It causes me to be unacknowledged and unheard, and develop a lack of self-respect. So, in other words, like we we're saying, especially for our viewers, who are raised in this, they have never really experienced self-respect because they were not given that as an opportunity. They were not given that as part of, the narcissist always has to sort of be, they can be jealous of their children. They have to have, they have to be able to make more than their children. They have to be able to have more, this or that than their children. If not, then you see the sabotage, which is to sort of muddle and befuddle. And this is like an old military term. So, this is, military, I don't think most people will arrive at that sort of discipline out of fun. I mean, do you see what I'm saying? So when you say that I'm just trying to say that there's a severity to this, which causes a lot of people what is called emotional and physical and, neurokinesthetic pain. So like the neuromuscular, where the the central nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system sort of begin to sort of, try to misfire and miswire, but you have to sort of correct that process and that sort of nerve flow, and get that back under your domain, get that back under your, in your house, not sort of, back where you're then getting flexibility. And that is then based on self-respect. And what does that look like, feel like, sound like? It is going to be different. It is going to be different. So be very careful of the hurts that are caused by this, especially, the severity of judgment where things have gotten out of balance and where, unbeknownst to you, maybe where you were too accommodating, sacrificing, or what have you, whatever it is, what does, though, function look like where where you've got the best self-reliance, independence, knowing what makes you tick, what makes you happy, and what gets you, dare I say, a little bit excited, or being able to just feel a little bit more comfortable with how things are. In other words, look at those, things that you've been procrastinating on. That is the big deterrent. In other words, what is that? And are you, and we're talking about on the emotional level. Yeah, you can procrastinate on making the bed or making dinner, but like on the emotional level, what have I really procrastinated on? And knowing out of my repertoire, even though I don't want to admit it, the main thing I feel I'm really lacking is. And an important feeling that I feel that I'm really missing from my experience is. And even though I've been so disrespected, when I'm really self-respecting myself, it always goes better when things always go better when I have self-respect, I usually feel, and this is what I do, and this is what I know, and it gets better and better. So in other words, do learn to develop and play in that sort of self-respect pond. And what does the body look, feel like to you? And where there is a lot of that pain and rigidity, look at where that is from bottled up or stored up or something that you don't want to let breathe. and to be willing to address that and then let go, where you no longer need to hold on to. In other words, being able to release and let go specific self-limiting beliefs or rigid ways of thinking, acting, behaving, and sort of planning, So you have to sort of be willing to get back to the drawing board as well and really get into the best alignment with my strongest and best self and really resonate on that and know what that is, because you can really only become it once you know it. And so that is an ever evolving and opening process. So it's good to work on that. And I hope that these videos do help. This is your buddy, Peace and Harmony, with you here today. And I hope that these videos do help. Please share, please subscribe, and for goodness sake, please donate for more great tools, videos, discussion, and support. Yes, and definitely please feel free to give back to the channel through your comments, through your posts, through your exchanges with each other, and through your donations. It all helps to keep this knowledge and sort of this torch alive for us. Have a beautiful day and a beautiful evening.